The timer is going. Doc, do you see the timer going on your end as well? Just to make sure.
No, there's no timer on my screen.
All right. Can you see anything that has numbers with
Yeah, I
red in
see it
it?
now. I see it. It's on the
All
upper
right.
left-hand side. Absolutely. We're good. We're great.
All right. Awesome. Because a fair few times I've jumped on, started talking to work out that nothing was being recorded
Yes.
until like 4 minutes in, and then I had to restart the whole thing.
I've done it. You name it, I've done everything. So I've lost podcasts before.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I've had
All
to
right.
redo them completely.
Let's make sure that that does not happen today. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to today's exclusive podcast. I have a very special guest, but before I allow my very special guest to introduce himself, as you are tuning in, if you could give us a hashtag live if you are watching this as a live. And if you are going to be catching this amazing podcast on the replay, give us a hashtag replay. So this podcast is the whole intention of it is to give information that most likely you've heard a little bit on over the years, just through media, just through reading certain articles. But my intention for today is with my amazing guest to dive deep into issues that us men predominantly have and what we can actually do about it. And I'm super excited to introduce you to my very special guest, Dr. Joel Gould. Thank you for jumping on for today's podcast. And if you just want to introduce yourself and just talk a little bit about what you've done, what you're doing, etc.
Great. Well, thank you for having me on your show. My name is Joel Gould, or Dr. Joel Gould, and I'm a dentist with over 30 years experience. I'm originally from Canada, and after 10 years of practice in Vancouver, British Columbia, I relocated to Los Angeles, and I practice now in Manhattan Beach, California, which is just south of the LAX airport, still considered a suburb of Los Angeles. And I have been practicing like I said, for over 30 years. About 7 years ago, I discovered by accident that I had sleep apnea. And I was discovered this because I was learning how to treat it. So that really changed my perspective on a disease that people think they know all about. And I have created a lot of information to share with my audience about what is sleep apnea and how does it relate to us and what's the real story and ultimately what's the root cause, because that's what I'm interested in really, is root cause medicine, root cause dentistry. I don't want to fix something by treating the symptoms. I want to treat the actual root cause of the disease, and that's my focus from here forward.
Awesome. So 7 years ago, you discovered that you had sleep apnea. Was this the catalyst that got you interested in health beyond oral health and just dealing with patients that had teeth that were coming to you at your practice with teeth problems? Like, how did you go
Right.
down the road of information or the medical side of things that was outside of dentistry?
Right. Well, I've always been interested in health and wellness and science, and I think that most dentists are really interested in overall health and fitness. So we see symptoms in the mouth, and I had been seeing symptoms over and over again that we had discussed, like something called bruxism. Bruxism is clenching and grinding. If you clench and grind during the day, it's daytime bruxism. Most people grind their teeth or clench their teeth at night, and that's nocturnal bruxism. So I've been seeing these symptoms and I had them myself. I had been grinding my teeth since dental school. And I graduated from dental school in 1991. And I had always been wearing an oral device called a BruxGuard, which is a plastic little retainer to stop damaging your teeth when you clench and grind. And it's funny because when I ask people if they clench and grind their teeth, they always say, "Oh yeah, but I'm fine because I wear a grinding guard." And that was something I believe that you and I had already discussed. And that doesn't really take into account why you're grinding your teeth in the first place. So bruxism, clenching and grinding, turns out that it's related to sleep apnea. Now I began getting interested in sleep apnea because, as a dentist, we have to keep up on our different topics. So there's requirements for continuing education. And I was really interested in what sleep apnea was with relation to dentistry, because everyone's heard of sleep apnea and they think they know what this is. This is a disease. You're too fat. This is your fault. you're a terrible person, and now you have to wear this machine for the rest of your life. And nobody wants to have that. So nobody even really wants to know if they have apnea. So what the reason dentists are involved in this is there's two main reasons. Reason number one is we're the primary doctors of the mouth and the oral cavity. And the only one who really can compete with us on that are ENTs, ear, nose, and throat surgeons. And they don't have the dental knowledge. The other thing is that we can actually fabricate an appliance to put in the mouth that will stop snoring or also treat sleep apnea. So there's a very good reason why dentists would be involved in the understanding of the disease. And how it basically works is when you have sleep apnea, if it's really severe, you will need to wear a CPAP, and that is the treatment of the symptoms. And if it's more mild, you may be able to wear an oral device, which is much more palatable, if you'll pardon that pun, because an oral device is easy to put in. You can travel with it. You don't have to plug it in. It's not like making you this horrible cyborg that your partner has to, hear this machine running at night. So it's a very reasonable way to want to consult, to figure out, is this something I can do? And so initially, I didn't understand what sleep apnea was. So I would go to these courses and I would listen to what the dentists and the doctors would say about the disease. And I went to a weekend course in Las Vegas because that's what doctors and dentists here do, to get my continuing education courses to learn something. And this particular sleep apnea group was telling me to measure people's necks. They gave me a ruler and they'd say, measure your patient's neck. And I'd say, well, why am I going to do that? They said, well, people with big necks have apnea. And I think that's really insulting to be putting a tape measure around someone's neck. But it is a way to speak about apnea because people don't want to talk about it. When I ask somebody how their sleep is, everyone's very defensive, saying, oh, I sleep great, as if that's something they need to be proud of or they should be ashamed of if they don't sleep right. But I can guarantee you, very few people are sleeping normally these days. And I know this because I do sleep studies and I've seen thousands of them. And I can tell you that normal sleep is very rare these days. So I came into it basically discovering what is sleep apnea for myself by taking a sleep study myself and finding out I had actually quite bad apnea, and then asking the questions, why do I have this? Is this genetic? Is this something that I was born with? Is this because I have an uncle or a father who had sleep apnea? And it took me down the most interesting road and really led me down the path to normal organic health and understanding how the human body was designed. Because it turns out that you can't fix or repair something until you understand how it works and know why it broke down in the first place. And so we're stuck with this issue we're at with allopathic medicine. That is, the medicine that we're stuck with today is treating the symptoms of disease, which sometimes is really necessary without going to the root cause. Now, don't get me wrong. You definitely want to treat the symptoms of sleep apnea, but if you knew how to prevent it, and you knew how to reverse it, it would certainly be much more important than just simply putting something on your face that's blowing air down your airway. Or what you're seeing now these days, this new invention where they're putting electrodes into your tongue and shocking your tongue every time. And that's from a company called Inspire. And they've got a treatment for sleep apnea. And this is definitely not the cure. Now, to somebody who's very sick, this could be life-changing, but you want to just think about, what are we doing here? So before you do any major surgery on your body, you kind of want to have an understanding of what's broken, what's going wrong in the first place. And those questions, what is the root cause of sleep apnea? And what can I do? What kind of program can I have? I'm a clinician. I'm a doctor that actively treats patients. Someone comes into my office and they have a problem. I want to fix it. They have a tooth that's broken. I can repair it. They have a snoring disorder and their spouse can't sleep. I want to treat that. So that's a very active way to be a doctor versus like a researcher. So that's the bigger picture. And how it comes together is actually quite shocking. And that's the journey that I went on 7 years ago.
Yeah, so is it a complete myth? Because my understanding up until recently was that if you were overweight, then you were a lot more likely to develop sleep apnea and have sleep kind of disorders. Is that incorrect, or what's the current
Right. It's
information
not that
on that?
it's not that it's incorrect. It's just that it's backwards. So you lose your sleep first. We'll go down, when we'll talk about the actual syndrome. And once you lose your sleep, you gain weight. Sleep apnea is a syndrome that is initially has its root cause, but once you start to get sick and don't sleep properly, then you start to put on weight. So people gain weight because they have apnea. The apnea is not the weight. if you lose weight, and I have many patients who will come to me and say, well, I don't have apnea anymore because I lost a lot of weight. And that's completely untrue. They actually still have apnea, and some of them quite severely. They just lost the weight, they reduced their snoring, and they thought that they were fine. This is a neurological condition that literally makes you sick. This is a problem with your human repair mechanism. All day you're busy doing whatever modern hunter gatherers do. You're going to work, you're taking care of your family, you're doing chores out in the yard, and at night you rest, regenerate, and repair. And if your system for sleep, your regeneration tool is broken, your body is going to break down. Now, most people will gain weight. Some people will not get fat, but they will have other problems. When you are not sleeping properly, your body cannot go through the normal stages of repair. And the end result is premature aging. Weight gain is just sort of a downward spiral, because the more weight that you gain, the heavier your neck gets and the more that can compress your airway. But this is not a mechanical syndrome. The mechanical aspects can confound it and make it worse. So when I say that, I see people with little tiny airways who have no apnea whatsoever, and I have people with massive airways that have terrible apnea. So the structure of the airway or the jaw or the mouth can compound. If you have a big airway, you're going to have less symptoms of apnea. If you have a narrow airway, you're going to have more symptoms of apnea. But the syndrome itself is neurological in origin. It starts in the brain and it plays out as a whole body syndrome. It's one component of a disease that I'm calling the modern epidemic. And it's literally the disease of modern living, and it's caused by more than one thing. But at its root cause, it's a dysregulation of the part of the brain that controls sleep and breathing. And that part of the brain is very well known as the rest and digest setting of the autonomic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system is the part of your brain that is automatic. You don't have to think about, when you go to sleep, you're not doing anything. Your brain's in control. When you're busy, you're breathing, you're not doing anything. Your brain is monitoring your circulation, your blood pressure, and all that. That is your autonomic, automatic nervous system. So what sleep apnea is a disease of the autonomic nervous system, where the majority of people are stuck in fight or flight and can't get into the rest and digest setting. And that's where the insomnia comes in. And so this starts out as insomnia because your body cannot shut down that higher level, or that part of the brain that's keeping you up and aroused. And over time, your body gets beaten down, and as more brain cells die from the hypoxia, lack of oxygen, the syndrome changes into one that is much more difficult to repair. So to your audience who are maybe younger men, this is really the perfect time to be thinking about prevention, because prevention is always better than repair. Once you have apnea, to get rid of it is probably one of the most difficult things in the world. And I'm one of the very few people that actually has a root cause reversal program, and nobody likes it because it's way more difficult to reverse than it is to repair. So if I can just sort of clarify that, most people will have a symptom of apnea until they'll reach that point of no return, where the part of their brain that's supposed to regulate sleep and breathing gets broken like a fried circuit. You need to actually change the circuit or do a Control-Alt-Delete, shut down the computer, the CPU, to regenerate it. And that's what apnea is. So you have an opportunity when you're younger, especially before the age of 40, 45, 47, to stop and reverse this, because there isn't anyone on this planet who's not going to suffer from sleep apnea once you really understand what this syndrome is. Like I said, which we'll get into. There may be people, if you're listening to this and you may be saying, oh, this guy's crazy. I encourage you to be skeptical of what I'm saying, because it may sound ridiculous. But if you have children, you at a minimum want to listen to what I have to say, because this is affecting your child from prior to conception. You want to know what I know about the very minimum of what is causing this syndrome. And it's fascinating, maybe even too simple for people to get their minds around.
Yeah, right. And this brings me on to the story that I heard when your patient came in. I heard you speaking about on another podcast, who was 70 years old and told you that he had recommended to him from a surgeon that he has this really not destructive, this very intense surgery where they expand the jaw, and this very intrusive kind of dental work. And I remember that you were saying that like most of his life, he hadn't had any of these kinds of problems before. So how is it that nothing has changed structurally? If you just want to retell that story, obviously better than what I just did, Doc.
Well, I've got a couple of really good stories, but basically, when especially here's where it goes really against the grain, because it doesn't matter who I tell the story to. So the root cause, when I tell medical doctors, especially, they're so dismissive, they kind of laugh at it. But when a 23-year-old female who's petite comes into my practice and says, "Somebody sent me to see you, and I don't know why," and I say, "Oh, tell me more," and she says, "Well, I slept normally for most of my life, and there's nothing wrong with my mouth or my airway or anything. And now they're saying I have sleep apnea, but what, did my soft palate grow or something?" And literally, I had that question asked to me. And so, what do you say to somebody who's petite, who has terrible apnea? If you ask a medical doctor, they'll say, "Oh, well, it's genetic." Well, what component of it is genetic? So this was somebody who came to me who had seen all other doctors, and the only news she ever had received was that her vitamin D level was low. And that's where this all starts, is that what could vitamin D possibly have to do with sleep and sleep apnea? But it has everything to do with it. And so when I ask a question like that to someone and they say, "Well, how do you know I have low vitamin D?" My doctor told me that it was low, but my doctor fixed it. Or they tell me some crazy story, and I say, "What's your vitamin D level now?" And if you don't know your level now, that's okay, because most people don't know it. But if you've never investigated it and you have a physical health issue, that's the first place that you need to go, because this one thing, this vitamin D and how it relates to your sleep, basically can affect everything. And just to sort of let me get it out there, vitamin D is not a vitamin, it's a hormone, and it regulates your microbiomes. Those are the areas of your body where you as a human are in a symbiotic relationship with bacteria that are producing chemicals that you are using. You are protecting them in your gut, in your mouth, in your lungs. These are your microbiomes. These are where the microbes live. And vitamin D will regulate which type of bacteria are going to be found there. And that's why when someone has low vitamin D, they can get more decay and gum disease, because the bacteria in the mouth that we don't want overgrow. But the same thing happens in the gut. When the vitamin D level is low, your body thinks it's winter, and you have a completely different setting for the microbes that your body wants you to have. In the old days, when your vitamin D level was low and you were a hunter gatherer, it was a sign to your body to store fat. It was a sign for your body to hunker down for winter. And now people are walking around in the middle of summer with very low vitamin D levels, and their body is reacting in the same way as if it was winter. As soon as the vitamin D level goes down, aside from the shift in the microbes, one thing that goes up is parathyroid hormone. That is a hormone that is signaling your body to store fat. And that was always a good thing from our evolutionary history when we were hunter gatherers up until 15, 20,000 years ago. And so there's a lot of science that supports this, but we have to think about things from an evolutionary perspective. What's the big deal? Why is vitamin D such a big deal? Well, because you wouldn't have to worry about this if you were a hunter gatherer living out in the wild. Your vitamin D level would be fine. Because you're a modern human living indoors, wearing clothing, putting on sunscreen, and then affecting yourself with all this new radiation, you are profoundly changing the sensory inputs of your body without understanding that this one thing, this one thermostat of vitamin D, is something that you cannot get from anywhere. You don't get it in food. It's not in juice or milk, no matter what you think, and no matter how healthy of a diet you eat. You will only get this from direct sun exposure or from supplementation. And it's preferred to get direct sun exposure, but everyone is also very fearful of the sun. But once that microbiome is destroyed, you're not making things like GABA. But the most important chemicals that you're making from those gut microbiome are B vitamins. There are 8 B vitamins, and your body uses them for everything, but especially in your mitochondria. B vitamins are critical for energy production in the mitochondria. That's your body's engine. And B vitamins, you can get them from food, but we got them from our gut microbiome. We always have. And that's where the real problem is, that we are having our gut microbiomes under attack. It's not just vitamin D, it's a lot of the things that's in the food that we're eating. So ultimately, the story I'm describing is a vitamin D deficiency, and it's caused by our modern behaviors, but it's also your vitamin D levels lowered by modern foods that you're eating. So being aware of that level is critical for your health, and it's extremely critical for your children, because if you have a child that snores or grinds their teeth or has terrible sleep, that child 100% is vitamin D deficient. And I know that from working on thousands of cases, but your doctor isn't measuring this. We don't measure kids' vitamin D. Doctors aren't taught that this is a hormone that's regulating their sleep. And if kids don't sleep, they don't grow. If you have a child that has his growth stunted, guaranteed it's the vitamin D level. If you have a child that makes those horrible noises when they're sleeping, that bruxism noise, or the wets the bed, or sucks their thumb, these are all very clear signs that their vitamin D level is low. And it's low because your doctor never learned it was important in the first place. So it's important for you as a father. It's important for your wife, who is now vitamin D deficient, who just had a baby, and her doctor is telling her to take her prenatal vitamins, which have barely 600 or 1,000 international units, and she needs 6, 8, or 10,000 to replenish, restore vitamin D. It's affecting her because she can't lose the baby weight. It's affecting her through postpartum depression. It's affecting you because your baby doesn't sleep because it's vitamin D deficient. It has colic and is a terrible sleeper. These are all simple vitamin D deficiencies, and they will disappear within days of proper supplementation of vitamin D in an appropriate way. And that's really the core of my message. I want to tailor it to your audience of the Dad Bod Project, because this is the same reason you get a Dad Bod. If your body's stuck in permanent winter, you can try exercising all you want. You will not get fit. You're wasting your time, because your body would rather tear down muscle than burn fat when it believes it's under attack and is going to die. And if your D level is below a specific amount, probably 50 nanomoles, that's bad news. It's just not good. And it's happened because it's unintentional on your part. It's because your doctor isn't saying to you, hey, how's it going? Let's check your blood level. How much vitamin D you're supplementing? Hey, it's summer, so you can cut down on your vitamin D. There's no understanding of this because medicine isn't interested, but you should be.
Yeah, and I actually shared my experience a few weeks ago on me going to get a blood test, and it was a really interesting conversation. 'Cause it's and
Right.
it was just like there doesn't seem to be that proactive approach to these kinds of issues, and I
Right.
almost like had to get into an argument with the doctor to get them to test, because their natural reaction, and I've had this happen so many times with myself and plenty of my clients, it's like, oh, like, why would we test vitamin D, for example? Like last time we tested it, it was fine. It's like, it's almost like it's almost like you need to be on death's door
Right.
with like
Right.
everything substandard to warrant like looking after and getting some data. And it seems quite backward to
Right.
me to have that kind of approach, doesn't it?
Right. Well, it's I think it's maybe even worse than that, because you kind of have to lie to your doctor to get a vitamin D test. But I told you this earlier. I know that this may be hard to get your mind around, but if you can find one single person on this planet, and I mean this, who has an initial diagnosis of cancer of any kind other than skin cancer, any kind, and that includes melanoma, if you can show me one person with that initial diagnosis and a high vitamin D level, that will be the first time that person has ever been found on this planet, because those two things, high vitamin D and cancer, they do not exist. What happens is when your vitamin D level drops to a certain point, your body can no longer reverse and repair all of the cancers that are happening all over your body every second of the day. So if there is this, and I can't think of anything else that you can test that has such a tight correlation between cancer, and you can do this in a really simple way. Whoever's listening to this for the first time, if you don't know your vitamin D level, this is not your fault. This is your doctor's fault. When I read about this, I was so shocked that my doctor had never bothered to check my vitamin D level for two different reasons. Reason number one, put into your computer vitamin D, cancer, and any disease, any cancer, and PubMed. PubMed is the medical research website that doctors use specifically to look up studies to say, is this real? I won't look at a Healthline or a WebMD story about anything. I don't care about that. I want to see a scientific study, because I'm not interested in someone who wrote an opinion piece on some science. But if you type in that cancer, whatever type of cancer, PubMed, cancer, and vitamin D, you're going to see a shocking amount of studies that say, well, all the people that we tested for vitamin D who had cancer were really low, but that doesn't mean that low vitamin D causes cancer. And I believe that. I don't believe that low vitamin D causes cancer. Once you understand what vitamin D does, if you don't have a high vitamin D level, you're not going to be able to reverse cancer. Vitamin D is really required for you to be healthy. It controls an extremely important process that I want to introduce now called autophagy or autophagy. And that really literally means self-eating. To anybody who wants to be fit and in shape, if you don't know what autophagy is, you're never going to learn which levers to pull on your body to be able to control to get to that point. Autophagy is a setting that your body has that will go into under many different circumstances, but without enough vitamin D, you cannot get into autophagy. And you can Google that. You can Google autophagy, vitamin D, and PubMed. And to any medical doctors who would be watching this, should be information to you. The other part of this that I really want to make clear is that the reason I'm such a strong advocate for this is that I suffered with Crohn's disease for 34 years. Now, if you don't know what Crohn's disease is, it's a chronic inflammatory bowel disease. It's a bathroom disease. It's painful, it's embarrassing, and it's deadly because it leads to colon cancer. Very high correlation. Okay. Now, at the age of 48, when I discovered what vitamin D was, I went and got a test. And I had to tell my doctor that I wanted a vitamin D. I was mad I'd never had one before. And my level was very low. I don't want to talk about the numbers because there's two different numbers. One is nanomoles and one is nanograms. But my vitamin D was very low. When I raised it to what I think is an optimal level, and that level is 150 to 200 nanomoles in the Australian system, and that's a level that most doctors would be shocked to see. They think it's outrageously high, but that's a level that I've achieved by natural sunlight alone, never mind supplementation. But when I raised my vitamin D level from the lower point to the higher point, my Crohn's disease disappeared just like that. And when I did the research, just typing in vitamin D, Crohn's disease, and PubMed, the studies that came up were small, but they were real. And it wasn't like a big pharma study where they're like, well, we had a 23%. It was 97, 98%. They took 30 people, 27 of them had a reversal of their Crohn's disease. Boy, that's information I would have liked to have when I was 14. When I was 18 or 21, when I was trying to live my life, but instead I was looking for bathrooms. So to me, I had my life taken away by the ignorance of such a simple thing. Of course, vitamin D is important. Humans are solar powered animals. This is a chemical. It's a hormone that we make on our skin from cholesterol. And doctors don't test it. They don't understand it. And when they hear someone like myself talk about this, before they actually even investigate what I have to say, they'll tell me I'm wrong, which is is really sad because this is such an easy thing to repair. Supplement your vitamin D. Lucky to be in Australia where there's mostly sunlight all year round to be able to get vitamin D, but you do have to be careful in Australia because the sun is stronger because of the apparent ozone hole. So you just want to be more careful. But this is really tragic. I will never get my life back, but I want to help out the parent who has that child right now who's wetting their bed or sucking their thumb. The parent who has that child right now where they hear that noise, that grinding, or that snoring, they think it's cute. Snoring is not cute. That's a sign your child is literally choking in their sleep. And it's a sign that you need to act. So I'm happy if you're watching this. I really want people to understand such an easy intervention. This isn't something that you have to go all in on. It's the easiest thing to repair. And how it relates to sleep apnea and as a man wanting to stay healthy, there isn't a man on earth who doesn't want to hear what I have to say, because when you hear about my health paradigm, it's not about starving yourself and eating lettuce. It's completely different than what people think. And, I don't know what's happening in Australia, but the entire world here is going vegan, vegetarian crazy. And that couldn't be farther from what's healthy for you. There were no hunter-gatherers who were vegetarian or vegan. Nowhere. Hunter-gatherers didn't have cutting boards to chop vegetables. They didn't. They only ate those vegetables when there was no meat around. And then the understanding that eating too much red meat is unhealthy, you go tell that to our ancestors. You go tell them that. And it's funny because to follow a proper diet, good luck in this modern world because we live a completely different way. So there's so much information I really want to share, but when it comes down to it, understanding the most basic needs of your body, the things you need to supplement, vitamin D3, vitamin K2, magnesium, and sulfur, those are my foundational four. I think those are so important that I created cartoon characters so that adults and children would get these ideas into their head and never forget it. My science is almost flawless. You can look up anything that I say, and if you want, you can try and tear it down. But I have the studies to support it. The problem is it's not very sexy to say these are the things you have to do. Everyone wants like a pill. Oh, I don't want sleep apnea. What pill do I take? Or what are the simple things I do? The problem is that you need to understand how the human body was designed, and then you need to know how it works before you can fix or repair it. Otherwise, you're literally just doing these interventions that ultimately are probably much more harmful than looking at the root cause. Nothing wrong with helping yourself stop the symptoms. You're wearing a grinding guard because you grind your teeth. Continue to do that, but dig deeper for what's the root cause of bruxism and what might be the other issues.
Yeah, definitely. And what you're saying just makes a whole lot of sense. It's nothing like revolutionary. And I don't mean that in a disrespectful way, but it's just like it just makes so much sense that if we try to replicate what would have happened in nature thousands of years ago, it makes sense that the closer we go to that, the better we end up doing. And what's funny is even to this day, like articles that come out, it's like shock horror, like now we know this. It's like our grandparents were saying, have probably been saying this for thousands of years. And it's
A
like
long time.
we,
Yeah.
we try to outsmart what system has been working for thousands and thousands of years, and to lo and behold, eventually go back to, oh yeah, they were they were right, like what they've been saying.
Right. Well, ultimately, one of my catchphrases is you can't fool Mother Nature. And the way I like to think of it is this way. So in the old days, we would be out there hunting and gathering. You'd be taking in senses, taking information from your senses, your sight, your hearing, your smell, and you would be walking through the grasslands wherever you were looking for food or hunting. And failure to really pay attention to your senses, like hearing a twig snap in the distance or smelling something, as a result of not paying attention to that sensory information, you literally could get eaten. Okay. And that was what it was like in the old days. The problem we have these days is we've taken away that immediate danger of getting taken out by an animal. Now, the difference is that you're still taking in information from all around you, your sight, your smell, your touch, your taste, but you're literally taking this information about science and health, and you're believing this doctor or that doctor. Then you're starting to manipulate and modify your lifestyle based on that information. Let's just say you heard this really great speech that red meat causes cancer by given to you by flawed data. Somebody wants to sell you a vegetarian product, and now you start eating vegetarian and you believe this is healthy for you. And you can do this for a while, but ultimately, what you're putting in your body is going to add up. And if you're not putting in the right nutrients, you're still going to suffer a really terrible fate because you haven't paid attention to the right sensory information. You've been listening to, information that would have come from tribal elders. Don't eat those berries, eat these mushrooms, do this, don't do that. That information is now gone, and you're getting your tribal elder information from the internet and a podcast and Joe Rogan and these different people. And some of that information is correct and some of it's wrong. And if you start to modify your life based on it, you don't know how this is going to turn out in 10, 20, or 30 years, but you should be thinking about that because it's the little things that you do today that turn into habits that ultimately will result in whether you age well or not. And I think this is what it really comes down to, is that everyone, never mind vanity of wanting not to have a dad bod, but nobody wants to break down and get sick. Nobody wants to get heart disease, cancer, or dementia. And those are the three leading causes of illness and death. That's what's death by natural causes? Is there such a thing anymore? Well, if I asked you what's death by natural causes, you'd probably say, well, I want to live to 95, 97, 105, no major illness, and then I want to die in my sleep painlessly. Well, that's what sleep apnea is. Sleep apnea is how we used to die in the old days. Now the problem is people are getting it at any age. They're getting it at 4, 5, and 6 instead of at 75 or 78 like they used to in the old days.
Yeah, and that makes so much sense. And seeing that we're talking about supplementation and vitamin D, if we just go back a few steps, and when the whole COVID lockdown happened around the world, I don't know how bad it was, but it was very, very strict around here in Australia. But what it led me to do is just start consuming heaps of content out there on increasing the immune system strength, like what to do, because obviously everyone was in a kind of panic state. Nobody kind of knew that what could happen to them or their family. So I dived into a lot of content on improving the immune system, and time again, the importance of vitamin D levels came up, and assessing it and knowing it and supplementing it. So if you could just share with us on exactly what the correlation is with respiratory health and vitamin D levels and the immune system response as well.
Right. So I'd like to explain it this way. And what I'm going to talk about has nothing to do with COVID. It has to do with all respiratory viruses. It has to do with all bacterial infections. It has to do with the immune system itself. So what I'm saying doesn't cure or prevent COVID, and the information I'm giving you isn't medical advice. I'm going to explain what vitamin D is and why it's different. When I talk to people about COVID, they say, "Oh, I'm taking everything. I'm taking vitamin C. I'm taking zinc." And they're doing it. Everyone's doing such a good job. When it comes to vitamin D, most people are very happy with 1,000 international units for many reasons. It could be in your multivitamin, it's either 600 or 1,000. It could be in your wife's prenatal vitamin, 600 or 1,000. And what does that mean? To the average person and to the medical doctor, we still don't really know what that means. I'm going to give some explanations as to why vitamin D is so much different than those other vitamins. So vitamin C is a vitamin. Vitamins are often cofactors. They're special chemical components that help your body work better. In fact, they actually activate enzymes. That's part of my work too, is understanding what enzymes are. But so you need certain vitamins to be healthy. When it comes to vitamin D, if you were to be living outside and not wearing sunscreen because hunter-gatherers didn't have sunscreen, your body would have a specific vitamin D level that would be a result of your sun exposure. When sunlight shines on your skin anywhere, your skin is made of primarily cell membranes that have cholesterol in it. I know cholesterol is supposed to be a bad thing, but it's what you are made of. Cholesterol is literally your best friend and your major repair and strength molecule. This is a fat that holds your body together. So this conversion of cholesterol to vitamin D happens only in ultraviolet B radiation, only at certain times of the day or night, on average 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. And that's when vitamin D is made on your skin. Over the next 8 hours, that vitamin D will get absorbed into your circulatory system and initially go through to your liver to get activated and turned into the storage form that your doctor measures. That's the 25 OHD that you can get tested. Now, that's not the active form of vitamin D. It doesn't really matter, but that's the level that we care about, because that is all about whether if you get sick, do you have enough stored vitamin D to fix what's going wrong? Because when your body gives a signal, whoa, there's an attack of any virus, it upregulates the activation of that vitamin D to make specific chemicals. And if you don't have enough stored, your body can't make it. So that's why I call having a low level of vitamin D human power saving mode. It's exactly like your phone. At a certain point, your phone runs out of power to the point where it hits 20%. And it gives you that warning, 20%. What does that mean? Well, it's going to shut down all non-essential functions until you plug that phone in and recharge it. And that's exactly the way I want you to think about your vitamin D levels. When it gets down to that specific level, that's 20 nanograms, you multiply by 2.5 to change into Australian nanomoles. Okay. So when you hit 20, that is a signal that you don't have enough vitamin D to utilize it for everything that your body wants to use. It's now sparing vitamin D just to stay alive. It's exactly like your phone. If you don't plug your phone in, you know it's going to go dead. If you don't plug yourself back into the energy of the sun, you're literally going to suffer a slow death, a breakdown from vitamin D deficiency. And it's going to look a lot like what you see out there: obesity, anxiety, depression, choking in your sleep. That's what this is all about. So every single person out there, you can test your vitamin D, but if you haven't been in the sun and you haven't been supplementing, then you're going to be low. And if you don't believe you're low, then just get a test. If your level is high, that's great, because there's different things that will lower your vitamin D. It's a stress hormone. And imagine this. So you're a hunter gatherer and you got to get food and you're out there during the day, because humans are not nocturnal. We're daytime creatures. So if you're out there, you're going to be getting more sun exposure. You're expending energy. You're going to be rebuilding your vitamin D stores. If you're sitting in your basement in front of your computer for hour after hour, being bombarded with radiation, that radiation is causing free radical damage. Your body is getting the signal and it's using up its vitamin D to stop the inflammation, and you're not refilling it because you're in your basement. You're not out there being a hunter gatherer. So you're going to want to supplement unless you spend a lot of time outside in the sun without sunscreen, which is a balance. So to give you an idea of how messed up this is, if I told you to take 20,000 international units of vitamin D, you would think that that's a massive amount and it's toxic. Well, that is 0.5 milligrams. So if I told you take 0.5 milligrams of vitamin D, you'd say, well, doctor, is that enough? What am I going to do? So I need to make it clear that we have more than a problem with just people not caring about their vitamin D or thinking it's like vitamin C. This is a level in your body that your doctor is not monitoring, but you need to. This is something in your body that you can refill by eating a vitamin. You can find it in some foods, but it's very rare. You have to eat a lot of fatty fish and whale blubber to get this naturally. You're not going to get it through diet. No matter how healthy you think you eat, you're not going to do it. And some people who eat really healthy end up making less vitamin D because those foods will stop that conversion of the vitamin D that you make into the active form. The foods in your liver are stopping the enzymes from activating vitamin D. And those are the vegetarian vegan foods. So there's lots of reasons why your vitamin D level will be low. But again, I can't think of anything that's so tightly correlated to cancer that you'd want to monitor or measure other than vitamin D. I just can't see it. And it may take you Googling studies on your own to realize that every type of cancer is related to this. People think cancer is genetic. It's not, it's environmental. You can listen to a podcast on my website that talks about cancer as a metabolic disease. And what does that even mean? Well, it's very different than what you think. People are afraid of getting cancer. They think that they're genetically, it's coming genetically. It's environmental. And a totally different discussion. But back to the vitamin D. So vitamin D protects you from cancer. So you don't want to leave it to chance. So do I supplement 20,000 international units of vitamin D? Sure. I do it when I forgot to take vitamin D in the winter, and I'm used to taking 8 to 10,000 international units. Why? Because I weigh 200 to 210 depending on where I'm at. And if I'm not in the sun, I need to supplement. And if I don't supplement, your vitamin D level will drop in 4 weeks, as little as 4 weeks. Okay. Now, vitamin D you make in sunlight will last longer than vitamin D you supplement, but it doesn't matter. Being in the sun is healthier than taking a vitamin D pill, but it doesn't matter. Vitamin D is so important that you want to supplement it no matter what. So, what's the normal rule of thumb? It's 1,000 international units per 25 pounds. Now, I'm sorry about that because I'm Canadian and I've lost my kilos and I've lost all my metrics. I've been in the US for 21 years. And but the calculation is that's very simple. So, gentlemen, your size and I don't know how much you are, what you weigh, but 6 to 8,000 international units daily is going to be a good dose for you if you're not going in the sun a lot. And remember, if you go in the sun, if you have clothing on, if you wear sunscreen, if it's not the right time of day, if it's totally cloudy, it's going to be variable. And that's why I have a lot of information in my material about how do you know when you're making vitamin D. These are the survival instincts that your tribal elders would have taught you. I'm doing that now. I'm giving you that tribal information of what does the modern hunter-gatherer need to get and stay fit. If you have a dad bod that you got after your wife gave birth, it's because you've been spending time inside and your vitamin D levels dropped and you're probably eating throughout the day, which is another big no-no. Hunter-gatherers didn't snack throughout the day. They had their kill, they ate. Maybe they went for 2 weeks without finding food. Our bodies were designed feasting and fasting, and that's how we work. I remember many years, I was born with a dad bod. I've looked like Homer Simpson most of my adult life. And I tried everything, but the doctors were telling me eat small meals throughout the day to stoke your metabolism of fresh fruit. Do not do that. Do not eat small meals throughout the day to stoke your metabolism of fresh fruit. It's one of the worst things that you can do. Fructose is a signal to your body to put on fat. And high fructose corn syrup that's in all the processed foods is like a quadruple signal to put on fat. So I have a lot of information that I want to share that's related to how the human body really works. And the perspective is, my stuff, I want it to be memorable. So I'm calling it MHG for modern hunter-gatherer. And literally because you have the biology of a hunter-gatherer and your body evolved outside without clothing hats or sunscreen. And this modern world is giving your body all the wrong signals. When you go to the gym at 7 or 8 p.m. with that blue light on the treadmill, going to make yourself run for an hour to beat the fat off of you, it's never going to work. Stop right now. I did all that stuff. I wasted years of my life trying to beat the fat off. If you don't understand how the levers are supposed to be pulled, you're just wasting your time. And so to anyone who's exercising, trying to get in shape right now, who does not supplement vitamin D and does not know their level, just stop right now going to the gym. You're hurting yourself. When you work out, your body is tearing down muscle, preserving fat, because you don't have the enzymes to burn fat. And you can't do anything in your body without the right enzymes. Nothing. So not understanding this and thinking you can beat the fat off of you by exercise, it's led many people to just going the opposite way. You'll break down your metabolism by destroying your muscle because your muscle burns more calories at rest than fat does. So all of the traditional stuff that we've been hearing, totally wrong. Totally wrong. Especially cutting out fat, totally wrong. Cutting out red meat, totally wrong. Increasing vegetables, sure. Be careful which vegetables. The green leafy vegetables all day long. The starchy vegetables are nothing other than sugar in your body. Doesn't matter how nutty and how healthy looking that bread is, in your body, it's sugar. You can't fool Mother Nature. Carbohydrate is a carbohydrate, is broken down to sugar in your body. That's it. Can't fool it.
Yeah, of course. And I guess the problem is with people that will argue with vitamin D, they'll say something like, well, I'm always in the sun. But like you mentioned, wearing clothes, the time of the day, the time of the year, sun cream is one. I don't know over where you are, Joel, but there is a massive amount of sun cream being applied. And the reason why is here in Australia, the sun is so hot and burns so quickly. So there's this kind of trade-off where it's like, yeah, you can be getting it naturally, but then you're going to get roasted. And are you really going to time it so that it's at the best time of the day so that you don't get burned? I mean, from a practical point of view, it's like it just doesn't really make sense to be trying to elevate the levels. Most of the time people don't even know what the levels are, like you mentioned,
Right.
but to elevate them naturally without the use of supplements just doesn't really seem too practical. And on top of that, when we're layering sun cream, my understanding is that there's no absorption of vitamin D at all with sun cream on. Is that true?
That's correct. That's correct. You have the slip, slap, slop stuff, and it's very, very dangerous because yeah, if you put on, having this discussion about how to safely go in the sun is really in depth, and it's something that I have gone into another podcast. But you have to understand that you wouldn't have to think about that if you were a hunter gatherer. Now, having said that, you can look at Australia and you look at the skin tone of the Aboriginal people, and the skin tone of a human animal will correlate exactly with the UVB radiation, the ultraviolet B radiation. So wherever you see that darkest skin tone, that is where the sunlight is the absolute strongest. And people with very light skin, people who came from Northern Europe came down to Australia, they do not have the skin tone that's suitable to be in the Australian sun, except at the most southern areas. I live in Los Angeles, and my background is Eastern European. And here you have to supplement. I could probably get my vitamin D all year, but I have a day job, and I've tried to, get my son in the parking lot at work, and my patients want to know, why is Dr. Gould sitting in the parking lot with his shirt off? It's not practical. Not practical. So supplementation, especially in Australia, especially if you have a European heritage and you don't have dark skin, I still recommend sun exposure, but I don't recommend direct sunbathing, especially never for your face. It's out there enough. But you do want to have sun exposure because the sun makes so much more in your body than vitamin D. You don't want to avoid it. You just don't necessarily want to try and get all your vitamin D and raise your level specifically by doing it by lying in the sun. An active lifestyle will give you a good vitamin D level, even if you're wearing clothes and everything, unless you wear the long sleeve, that whole outfit where every single thing, part of your body is cut off. I don't think that's healthy. But you do have to understand that if you look at the Aboriginal population, that's the skin tone that's healthy in that location. And you can just take somebody who was, Aboriginal Australian, put them in Iceland, and take somebody who's born in Iceland and put them down in Northern Australia. You're going to see that white person blister, burn, and get very sick. And you're going to see that darker skinned person is going to get just as sick up in Iceland unless they supplement their vitamin D. Mother Nature custom designs our exterior based on where your ancestors evolved. People can put all kinds of thoughts on race if they want, but your skin color is nothing other than a function of the UVB radiation where your ancestors evolved. And to understand that's very powerful. So somebody with very light skin, much more aggressive with the appropriate sunscreen, to me, non-nanoparticle, thicker, only mineral, only zinc oxide, titanium dioxide, non-nanoparticles. It's very hard. Some of your Australian clothing is very useful for a lot of that sun, protect yourself from the sun. There's no doubt, because that's a stronger sun than that white skin was necessarily meant to be in. However, if you're going to go in that darker, if you're going to go in that stronger sun, there are things that you can do to protect yourself, like having a base tan, like taking a supplement like sulfur. there's things that you can do to spend more time in the sun in a healthier way. So I don't want people to avoid the sun, but definitely people living in your, in your country need to be extra careful with that natural sun exposure.
Of course. And it's worth noting, Doc, is this true that the higher subcutaneous fat that your body carries, the more difficult it is to absorb vitamin D? Is that true?
Well, not necessarily. You need to think about vitamin D as a fat soluble hormone. It's hydrophobic. So if you have a lot of fat, vitamin D is going to build up in your body to a specific level depending on how much you're taking in. So if you put me next to a 400-pound man who was a lot heavier than I was with body fat, you're going to find that if we take the same dose, I'm going to raise my level quite quickly, where that person is going to take a lot longer to come up to the same level because they have to fill all of that extra body mass with vitamin D. Your body won't partition it to say, oh, no, no, well, that fat doesn't need it. Your fat does need it. Every single cell in your body is utilizing vitamin D to read the DNA that you have in those cells. It's just that a heavier person is going to require more. That's why I give my rule of thumb as in pounds. So 1,000 international unit per 25 pounds. So the bigger and heavier you are, the more vitamin D you need. I've got some videos on there of telling people I'm taking 100,000 international units of vitamin D at one time. And the reason I put that video out there is, imagine this: what if you got some sort of virus that you were worried about that could get you really sick and you hadn't been supplementing? I wanted to put something out there to say, well, how can I raise my level right now? And what's toxic? There is no one-time toxic dose of vitamin D. You can empty a whole bottle in your mouth, and you'll see me do that. You can take 1,000,000, 2,000,000 units of vitamin D. It's not an overdose. There is no one-time toxic dose. That's not the way this chemical behaves. Do you want to do that? No, that's not a natural way to get vitamin D. So when I tell people who have not been supplementing, they want to be the most natural they can be. Take 20,000 international units a day for 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, and then lower it down. So that's called a loading dose, getting it into your system faster. Because you can consider your vitamin D level like a reservoir of water. And if you're using it more than you're refilling that reservoir over time, it's going to get lower and lower and lower and lower. Now, if you're really using it up, sitting in your basement on your Zoom calls, now you're down to this lower level, and now you get sick. Your body cannot use the vitamin D because you don't have any. And the vitamin D will be used in your immune cells. Those immune cells without vitamin D will not make the antimicrobial proteins that your body was designed to have. So when your vitamin D level is low, and it's low because your doctor doesn't know about it, it's low because you're being careful, you're avoiding the sun, you're doing the things that are supposed to be healthy, and then you get sick, and your doctor doesn't know that the neutrophils, the actual cells in your body that are meant to go fight these pathogens, cannot produce their goods. They come up to the scene, they go, I know what to do to kill this shit. These viruses, they suck. I'm going to kill them. And it goes into its own stores to get those antimicrobial little torpedoes. And it's like, oh shit, I can't make those. Why can't I make those? I don't have enough vitamin D. If I only had enough vitamin D, I could make this natural antiviral protein. There are over 200 special proteins that are only made at higher vitamin D levels. And those are the proteins that your body uses to fight off not just viruses, but bacteria as well. If you ever had a cold that turned into a lung infection and you need to get antibiotics, you have to ask yourself why, especially if you're eating healthy and going to the gym. That happens because your vitamin D level is low. And once you've had this drawn out cold with a sore throat for 3 days, 7 days of blowing your nose and then coughing, I don't get that anymore. I stopped having those colds probably within 3 months after raising my vitamin D level. I didn't get a cold for 3 years. And when I got my first cold, I kind of laughed at it. So when that viral infection goes on to a bacterial infection, it's because the microbiome of the lung is being invaded by bacteria that you can no longer fight off because your immune system has been handcuffed because you do not know your vitamin D level and it's too low. And as a result, your gut microbiome isn't making the right B vitamins. Every cell in your body can't utilize all the energy that's coming in because it doesn't have enough B vitamins to make the energy that you need. And this is a syndrome that you're going to see is all linked together. And it all stems from low vitamin D. And then as a secondary influence is the poor sleep that you get when you choke in your sleep. So without vitamin D in your body, it's so interesting because you cannot make vitamin D. This is a very unique chemical that's only made by ultraviolet B radiation from sunlight. This is a chemical that was designed to be made in sunlight. And the opposite is melatonin. Melatonin was the chemical that Mother Nature created to be made in darkness. And you want to know how these chemicals interact. And I've got a lot of really important information about sunlight and radiation that's related to this. And it's not out there because no one wants to talk about this. Again, it's not sexy and there isn't a pill. You have to actually change your life if you really want to maintain health in the modern world. You have to actually modify your behavior and act like a hunter gatherer. The cure to what I'm calling the modern epidemic is something called tribal life. That's literally the cure to the modern epidemic. It's emulating the behavior of your ancestors without having to move back out into the wild. And you want to know what that is. And you want to know how easy that is. But if someone doesn't give you the right rules, isn't it frustrating that you could be doing everything wrong? To a lot of your listeners, I'm sure they're thinking, well, I want to be fit, but what could I do right now? Well, I've got this baby and I've got all these responsibilities and that beer is there, that pizza is there. I'm just going to, I want people to understand that you're stuck in this situation because the rules, the real rules, have not been provided. No one has laid out these rules in a way that's like, oh, shoot. Well, if that's the case, if I tell you that the healthiest food on the planet is a fatty piece of red meat, how many of hopefully your listeners will be more informed, but how many of your listeners are going to go, hey, honey, let's get the barbecue going because that's all we're going to eat is shrimp, barramundi, Moreton Bay bugs, and meat. We're gonna barbecue grass-fed meat because you want grass-fed, you don't want corn-fed. That's another issue. But wouldn't your viewers want to know that something that they love is actually healthy for them, rather than saying, "Oh, I've got to cut back on my gut, so I'm going to eat a bunch of rabbit food." Nobody wants to hear that. That's not a fun message. So I'm really bothered that this information isn't more obvious and available, and that's what I'm trying to do. I'm really trying to put it out there.
Yeah, of course. And doctor, why is it that so much of this, what you're saying just makes sense? And again, it doesn't sound like anything revolutionary, and we're just literally going back to what our ancestors were doing. Why is it that there's such limited knowledge with our GPs and our doctors
Right.
out there, and there's almost so much resistance?
Right. Well, so think of it this way. So I'm a member of that traditional medical, dental, whatever, the allopathic system. So when I went to dental school, I was told this is the way things work. Now I'm always curious and I was excited to get out there in the real world and I like to read scientific studies. Every medical doctor or dentist is technically a scientist experimenting. In medicine, there's very little reward for anyone who bucks the system. There's very little reward for anybody who's like, hey, I know you came here for that prescription for depression medication, but what I really want to tell you is if you just change your entire lifestyle, you won't need that medication. Everyone wants a quick fix, everyone wants a magic bullet. And when you're not feeling good, the idea that you're going to modify your lifestyle profoundly versus I'll just go get this procedure, I'll just take this pill. It's just we're conditioned to believe that it's one thing causes one disease. If you fix this, you'll be better. Or you're seeing this a lot on TV. It's clinically proven if you take this blah, 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 whatever, this supplement, it's going to fix everything. No such thing exists. Vitamin D is as close as you can get to that magic bullet. And even that's not the only thing. The problem is that our health has been obfuscated forever for profit by people who really don't care. Your doctor may be a kind and caring individual, but you don't know what you don't know. And if your doctor doesn't even have the common sense to read up on these two things, vitamin D3 and vitamin K2. Now, to anyone listening to this, go to your doctor. And if you say, I want to raise my vitamin D level or I want a vitamin D test, and your doctor says, well, if you're going to take 10,000 IU, that's toxic. Number one, ask them for the study to show that there is no such study. Number two, they immediately should say, well, if you're going to take that much vitamin D, then you better be taking with magnesium and vitamin K2. And if they don't know that, there's something wrong here. This is 2022. Almost everyone has Google. People can look this up for themselves. Medical professionals are not curious. My local pediatricians, instead of me having a great relationship with them, when we have a mutual patient, and this is happening currently. So I get a child who's in my office and I can see they're grinding their teeth. Their parents tell me they snore. They have warts. They have all kinds of different things that are exactly symptoms of vitamin D deficiency, and I tell them, please tell your pediatrician, I think that you're very low on vitamin D. And the pediatrician calls me and says, what are you talking about? Large tonsils. So tonsil size is inversely proportional to vitamin D status, meaning the bigger the tonsils, the lower the vitamin D. So when I see that, I try and talk to the pediatrician. The pediatrician doesn't call me back. He says, well, do you have any studies to prove that? So I send 3 peer-reviewed studies, and I never hear back from that doctor. He doesn't call me back and go, hey, how cool. I'm going to start looking for those enlarged tonsils and start to think about vitamin D. That doesn't happen. And I live in a really progressive state. California, I'm in Southern California. My doctors are so close-minded that they have yet to even want to know why I'm so interested in vitamin D in the first place. I had one of the nurses from the obstetrics gynecology clinic come over and start yelling at me in the middle of my reception room, telling me to stop telling their patients that are my patients, stop taking toxic doses of vitamin D, like 5,000 international units. If you are a woman hearing this right now and you've just had a baby, if you are not taking 5,000 IU of vitamin D, I feel sorry for you because I know how you must feel. I lived it for 48 years. Fibromyalgia, back pain, neck pain, insomnia. If you don't have enough vitamin D, you're not going to be able to get into restorative sleep and you're going to feel miserable. If you don't have enough vitamin D, you're not going to lose the baby weight. If you have postpartum depression, you are vitamin D deficient and your doctor doesn't know this. And I'm not concerned about insulting anyone. If any medical doctors want to have a one-on-one debate with me and you want to show me the studies that tells me where I'm wrong, let me know. The sad part is the simplicity of the syndrome and the damage that it causes is massive. I lost my life to the syndrome and I will never regain those years of illness. I am a different person. I no longer have to worry about my Crohn's disease. I know people who've had their colons removed. I know people who've had their tonsils removed. That's mutilation. Do not take any part of my body that I can repair naturally. If I have a burst appendix, then you got to take it out. But why does an appendix burst in the first place? And yeah, it's low vitamin D, guys. Sorry. If you want to show me something that is not related to vitamin D, I'll believe it. But where it gets complicated is vitamin D is involved with your genes. And vitamin D actually lets you have access to your genes. So if you don't have enough vitamin D, it affects you in a genetic way. So not everyone who has low vitamin D is going to get Crohn's disease. That was my fate because in my genetic background, when the vitamin D level goes down, there's certain illnesses that come up. For other people, especially people with diabetes, is vitamin D deficiency and eating the wrong food. Heart disease is a vitamin D deficiency with several other deficiencies. The idea this isn't on our radar is disgusting, and it's because our doctors are brainwashed by the companies that sell medications and therapies that make money. No one is getting paid for getting people off medications and for less procedures. Even me, as a dentist, I get money per procedure. If I tell my patients don't take vitamin D, they'll get more decay and I'll have more work. I don't think that's a really, I have a different perspective on life, but this is all really about prevention. This is about who has your best interests at heart. I'm trying to sell you something and I have stuff on my website to sell, but nothing that doesn't make money is going to be successful. I want to be successful, so I have to have products that I sell. Do I believe in them 100%? Big Pharma has all kinds of products that it sells, and that no one ever gets mad at them for selling it. They say, oh, well, that's their business. Big Pharma has not sworn an oath to do no harm. Big Pharma does not care about you. You may see these words, clinical studies, clinically proven. It doesn't mean anything. Nobody has your health interests at heart except for someone like yourself. You're looking to help people and you want to sell your exercise program, which is great. You shouldn't be attacked saying, well, you're saying all this exercise stuff because you just want to make money off of it. That's ridiculous. But that's where we're at. And so no one's going to do these bigger studies. The studies that you see, they're done by companies with millions of dollars that have a product that they want to sell you. They don't care that you can take a supplement that's 1/20th of the price or 1,000th of the price that could prevent the disease in the first place. That's not their job. That's my job. That's your job as somebody trying to share information. And I want to make my stuff fun. That's why I added all those cartoon characters to make this more engaging. Because when I say enzymes, what does that even mean to people? But just so you know, every single thing that happens in your body is run by an enzyme. And you need to know. I want you to know what an enzyme is. So I created enzymes as cartoon characters to be able to get your mind around it. You won't make those enzymes that are critical to life if you don't have the right amount of vitamin D. You just won't. It's not possible.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for that, doctor. So with talking about kids, seeing that we're speaking about parenting and kids, my son, as I shared with you, went and actually seen a doctor that you jumped on the podcast with, and the whole expanding of the jaw is what my son needed, because as his teeth were coming in, they were starting to buckle because his jaw wasn't expanding to the size that it needed to. So if you could just share with the audience what the connection of is K2 and vitamin D
Sure.
and bone expansion.
Great. Well, I really want to give a shout out to your dentist, Dr. Stephen Lin. And he is somebody who I really admire because he has taken to heart my hero, our tribal elder, was a Canadian dentist by the name of Weston A. Price. Now, if you're really interested to understand what this looks like, you can order this book online. You can Google it. It's called Nutrition and Physical Degeneration. And Dr. Weston A. Price went on a journey around the globe to discover why people's teeth were falling apart. His patients had terrible teeth, and he wanted to go to communities where they had good teeth. And what he found was, it didn't matter where around the globe it was, to have good dental health, there was a few requirements. Those later turned out to be vitamin D3 and vitamin K2. And those are, I call them the dynamic duo because they work together. Now, vitamin D is instrumental in you bringing calcium into your body. Without vitamin D, you cannot absorb calcium. But once that calcium gets into your body, it has to be grabbed and taken and put into bone. And that's how children grow. And that's how bones grow. You get taller by bones lengthening. And bones will only lengthen if you increase the amount of calcium getting into them. So what Price found out was that in these communities where there were Aboriginal people eating the same Aboriginal diet, their children had beautiful teeth. They had room for all 32 teeth, and they had curved arches that were with no crowding. And in one generation, when the children would not eat that traditional diet, he would see the very next generation a complete collapse, not only of the jaw, the teeth, gum disease, decay, but a collapse of the actual structure of the jaw. So when you are growing, you need to be breathing normally to create the right shape of the airway. And that normal breathing comes from nasal breathing. So Dr. Lin is a fanatic, as I am, about nasal breathing. So that's how we were designed. Humans were designed to take in air through their nose. It humidifies the air, it filters it, it adds nitric oxide into it, and helps to expand the lungs for proper breathing. Not only that, nasal breathing is instrumental in the formation of the entire oral cavity. When you become vitamin D deficient for any reason, you cannot breathe through your nose. Multiple things will happen. Tonsils will overgrow, like we discussed. The actual nasal passages will swell. You'll have an increased amount of colds and flus. So nasal breathing will be impaired, and children will begin to breathe through their mouth. Once you start to breathe through your mouth, you're now shaping the jaws. The jaws are very flexible. You know, when you get braces, we move the teeth around through bone. Now you're starting to shape the jaw in an unnatural way, and it creates a syndrome that I call long face syndrome. If you want to know more about long face syndrome, I have a half an hour podcast I do with Dr. Suzanne Bennett. You can Google my name, Dr. Joel Gould, and Dr. Suzanne Bennett, and long face syndrome, where I go into the details of what's happening to kids. So what happened to your child was they were initially vitamin D deficient, but they were probably also vitamin K2 deficient. So where K2 comes in is that without vitamin K2, that calcium will not get into the teeth and bones. The body will not have enough calcium to put into the bones to make it grow out to that level, and you will have smaller jaw. So we want to have both these things because nothing in the body works in isolation. An appropriate amount of D3 and an appropriate amount of K2 together so that the foods that are eaten and the calcium that's absorbed can get put into the right place. And this is a very specific thing to the growth of the jaw. It's quite fascinating. Now you can intervene. And that's where this comes into what we talked about at the beginning of the podcast is allopathic medicine versus root cause medicine. Dr. Lin is looking at root cause. He's saying, to prevent this, we need to have vitamin D3, vitamin K2, and an organic diet that is decreased in processed sugars, carbohydrates, and especially industrial seed oils. These are very unhealthy products. So you want to eat only animal products and only natural products, not vegetable oils. They're very bad. But in your case, so your child had the syndrome already because this is a deficiency that started even before the child was conceived. And now you can treat it by expanding the jaw. We shouldn't have to. And it's okay that you do. I had to have it done. A lot of my patients have to have it done. Most kids these days are having 2 phases of orthodontics. It wasn't the norm back in the day, but these days we're understanding that the airway has to be made wider so that it doesn't collapse. Most dentists do not know what Dr. Lin knows and I know about the root cause of this failure of the entire airway and sleeping system. That's the root cause. If you had known this, your child would have not necessarily needed that. There's other components to this, but that's the primary: vitamin D3, vitamin K2, and cutting out those super processed foods. And one of the reasons that makes those processed foods that contributes to this syndrome is that those processed foods prevents your child from activating vitamin D. So you could be this great parent who's giving them the exact right vitamin D dose, but the kids are eating these processed foods and they cannot convert that vitamin D into the active form. So it's just like they don't even have it. So that's the explanation of the syndrome in the growth of the jaw. And you really want to let your child have every opportunity to have normal facial growth, because that breathing through the nose and the system where the tongue is positioned on the roof of the mouth, it shapes the palate, it shapes the airway, and humans should have broad airways, curved arches with room for all of our teeth. The idea that there isn't room for wisdom teeth is an environmental issue. It's not a genetic issue. You don't get the change in one generation from a hunter-gatherer with a perfect smile to a child with a collapsed, rotting set of dentition in one generation. That's above genetics, or what we call epigenetic. So people are thinking about genetics, that this is a genetic issue. Oh, my father had this. There's a genetic component, but this is almost exclusively environmental. Most people have the right DNA to get a normal facial structure and profile, but if you inhibit the major factors that help to shape and create the airway, you're going to mess up the airway and how it actually forms. And it's really critical to get to your child before they hit 18, 19, 20, because then it's too late. You may already, you're too late in a lot of cases, but great thing about orthodontics is the jaw can be expanded. Great thing about clogged nasal passages, a child can have vitamin D supplemented. If your child was that sickly child who got every cold and flu, your child's vitamin D deficient. They may have a need for more than the average person. There are some things that can affect your use of vitamin D, but for the most part, it's just the ignorance of the importance of how these vitamins interact to control growth, to affect sleep, to affect breathing. And that same microbiome that's giving you those chemicals is affecting your child as well. The crazy part with kids is we see them stop snoring. We see them stop grinding within 2, 3, 4 days of supplementation of vitamin D. And, I don't know if you ever had your child making that grinding noise, but it's a very disturbing noise. That's not good.
Definitely. Yeah. And that has almost gone away since we have been supplementing and since he's had the work done by Dr. Steele as well.
Great. Well, I'm glad that you had that intervention. And, you don't need to have the expensive orthodontic intervention potentially if you catch this early enough. So I'd be happy, so on that note, so the for children, it's the same as adults, 1,000 international units of vitamin D per 25 pounds. All right. Always give vitamin D with vitamin K2. I have all of this information down, including links to peer-reviewed studies. I don't expect you to just take my word for it. You can investigate this, but I have a free ebook that you can download it from my website. It's modernhuntergatherers.com. You put in your email. I promise not to send you anything other than, the most limited stuff. I won't give out your email address, but you can download this ebook. It's 100 pages of information. Some of it may resonate with you, some of it may not, but there are links and there are charts and dosing and studies and all that kind of stuff. I'm a scientist and I really want to share my information in the most meaningful way so people can utilize it. Having me confuse you with numbers and everything is the opposite of what I want to do. My take-home message is, if you don't know your vitamin D level, you should investigate. It's important. This is really important stuff. Vitamin K2, you cannot get it in almost any food sources anymore. You really want to supplement it.
Yeah, that's right. So I thank you so much, Doctor, for jumping on and sharing so much information. And before we wrap up today's podcast, if you want to just share with us your book, The Modern Epidemic, what was the inspiration, obviously on top of the things that we've already discussed today? Like what do you really want as an outcome to this book, and what do you hope to do with it?
Right. Well, so if you think of what I'm really saying, as a Canadian dentist, I went to dental school just up the road from this other really cool dentist that 80 years ago published a book that I never saw. I never read about it in dental school. I never learned the contents. And because of that, because no one made the importance of vitamin D3 and vitamin K2 clear to me, I suffered for 34 years with obesity, anxiety, depression, and Crohn's disease. And when I see that book, it just broke my heart to know that this information was out there all along. Before we had the internet, I could have gone to the library and looked up that book and I could have read it, and it would have changed my life. So, what I decided to do is be the person so that this will not happen to another generation of kids. I decided to take this simple information and go one step further than Weston Price and to bring it into popular culture. So I designed cartoon characters that sing and dance in an effort to bring this into popular culture. You've heard of Pokemon. What did anyone ever learn from that? Absolutely nothing. These characters will sing and dance, they will be memorable, and I want them to be part of children's life and growing up so that this information can never be hidden or obfuscated again. No parent should have to wonder why their child has cancer. No parent should have to wonder why their child is the sick child when this information is literally sitting there in scientific studies over the last 20 and 30 years. I decided to take it all and put it together. And I have three books. One is the book that's going to give you all the scientific references. That's The Modern Epidemic. That's going to give you the story from my perspective. I wrote another book called From Bang Till Bust. It is the history of humanity from the Big Bang until you die. And then I wrote a third book called The Modern Hunter Gatherer Survival Guide. That's the book that I want people to really be interested in because it's going to give you those rules in a fun way with chants and slogans to remember them. So, how do you know if you're making vitamin D? My cartoon characters, the heroes of light, they'll tell you that in a short cartoon clip and they'll make it fun. So, what I want to bring to this discussion more than anything is that you're suffering, your children are suffering from a lack of understanding of very simple information that has been swept away year after year and obfuscated. It's happening again. The vegetarian, vegan stuff that's coming up, do not be fooled by this. This is not a health boon. This is the wrong direction to go in. I wanted to put this out there at every tier from the highest level, from a medical doctor researcher who could just click on the study and go, oh, he may just be a dentist, but that study's real, all the way down to a child who will be much happier getting a stuffed animal that's an enzyme. My catchphrase is they're called cozyzymes, much more than a stuffed animal. I want my information that's really Weston Price's and really Stephen Lynn's information and really the information that should have been out there 10, 20, 30, 40, 80 years ago. I want that information to be part of popular culture. And that's why I made these cartoon characters into celebrities. They're celebrity VIP vitamins and minerals because people are fascinated with celebrity. And these are the celebrities that you should be interested in. These are the celebrities that are going to get you into that death by natural causes category. So
Yeah.
that's my take home message. If you want more specific and to listen to this, if your wife is telling you snore, you're vitamin D deficient. You may have sleep apnea. Don't be afraid to get a sleep study. You don't have to get the CPAP. If you have sleep apnea, come to my website, send me a message. We can talk. Just because you have this syndrome it's not a death sentence. It's not caused by obesity. It's a neurological condition that's going to mess you up and it's not going to go away. Prevent it, get on top of it, and understand that without your regeneration tool of nightly sleep, you're never going to be healthy. You can sweep it under the rug all you want, but in the end, it'll be too late and you'll have burnt out the circuits in your brain that control the program that your brain has for sleep and breathing.
Doctor.
Not to be too intense, but this is a big deal for me. I had my life taken away, and I'm not mad at any one person. I'm upset that this is the way things are going. I really want to share this information. Parents, you don't have to believe me, but if you have a child, you owe it to them to give them every opportunity so that they can have the best and healthiest life. And if your doctor didn't talk to you about vitamin K2, they can Google it too. It's time for you to understand that your doctor may be a great person, but they don't have the information that's going to take you through into the next phase of what we're experiencing as humans on this planet.
Well, I think that we are very lucky that we have people like you that are going out of their way to go, not so much go against the trend, but to just dare to poke their neck out and to go out there and give information that is so desperately needed. So, Dr. Joel, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for all the knowledge that you drop on us. And I know there's so much information. I'm going to have to listen to this many times to try to absorb it. But I mean, I appreciate you so much for sharing such valuable information. And like you mentioned, if you can just help one person make a difference in their life, then your job is well done. And I'm very certain that the information that you shared on today's podcast is going to do more value than just one person. So again, thank you so much.
Great. Well, it's a pleasure. And anyone who wants to get this information, it's free of charge. You can find it either on Amazon. My books are out there. I haven't launched my 3 major books, so I'm kind of teasing this that I haven't really put my systems out there for how to reverse this. But if you read my my ebook, it's going to give you a hint that you need to reconnect to the elements of life: air, earth, fire, and water. And I'm slowly putting my stuff out there. But I'm happy to get any attention. The most important thing I can do is if I can prevent a child from going through what I went through for no reason at all, that's really what it is. So I look forward to hearing from any of you. Modernhuntergatherers.com, free download. And I have a website. I sell things, but I don't care what type of vitamins you buy. Make sure it's from a trusted source and pay attention to what the dose is. You need to understand this. This is the future of taking charge of your health, is understanding how your body actually works. Because once you understand how your body works, you can fix and repair it.
I'll definitely share your links at the bottom of this video, so I'll get them off you at the end. But again, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure, and just letting you know that Tuesday is an amazing day because we're out here in the future.
The future is bright. That's one of my catchphrases. The future is bright. Nice to see that tomorrow looks good.
Thank you, Doctor, so much, and it's been a pleasure to have you on my podcast.
Great speaking with you. Thank you.
See you later.
Thanks.